Thanks for joining us again on the Leadership Detectives. This week we're going to drill into a subject which is quite often forgotten in the leadership world, and we're joined by a special guest this week, Chris Prince, who's a good friend of mine and ex-HR director, specialist in the HR space. And we're going to talk about the importance of HR to leaders and how leaders can get the best out of their HR director and their HR team. Especially at the moment, we're seeing HR coming into its forefront during the pandemic and helping leaders and helping boards make decisions that are going to affect the whole business. So a really, really important topic to talk about, and we drill into how you can get the best out of your HR team and how you should be engaging your HR team to support the business. Please subscribe to our channel. Please thumbs up. Please give us a like. Please leave us your comments as well. We'd love to hear from you and hear what you think. So without further ado, let's jump straight into this episode. And we're live.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everyone. Welcome back to Leadership Detectives. Here we are, episode 15. I think Neil's probably talked about, we'll talk about it later on as well, guys. We've launched as the Leadership Detectives as a branding, but we can come back to that topic later on. Neil, welcome. How are you? You good?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, good to see you. Good to see that our backgrounds are starting to look a little bit more professional. We've got plants in the background, we've got lights, we've got microphones working. But no, great to see you, and great to have, sorry, go on.
Have you finished your quarantining now? Are you now free to move around?
I am, yeah, I finised Monday. So
okay,
quarantine's finished, so I can actually leave this office, although I don't leave it very often at the moment because I'm quite busy. But no, it's great to have another guest on this week, and I'm delighted to welcome Chris Prince, who's a really good friend and colleague of mine, and Albert knows Chris well as well. Hi Chris, good to see you.
Hi guys.
Hey,
how are
Chris,
you?
welcome.
I'm very well, thank you. Excited by this prospect of being recorded and viewed thousands of times.
Brilliant, good. Well, and I know you've got a lot of value to add, because so I've been working with Chris probably over 5 years actually.
Yeah.
So I first started working with Chris when he was HR director at a large American IT company. And then Chris has been helping a number of my clients with HR type issues, questions, challenges, and training. And Chris focuses on, his experience is vast in the HR space, and he's great to engage on a conversation like this. And we really just wanted to get a perspective on how HR supports leaders and how leaders could get more out of HR, because it's a key function. And I guess, what I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 months is that the HR function has become much, much more prominent. I was saying as we were warming up to this that, you see politicians standing next to medical specialists when they're doing briefings. And we've also seen CEOs, MDs, senior leaders standing next to HR directors during this current crisis. So what's your view, Chris, on the role of HR and how it's suddenly come to the forefront in the last few months?
Yeah, it's really changed. I mean, I have to say, I've been in the profession long enough to know what HR was called before, and that was called personnel. I think that was my first title, personnel officer, and actually even some people might be listening might recall the welfare officer days. So right. I've really seen the profession changed from what was personnel to what was called HR, and then it's obviously evolved to the concept of HR and people officer now. So it has become much more strategic as a role. Organizations start to value the role, and we see them more positioned. There's still a challenge actually at HR trying to be recognized at the board level, but certainly within the sort of senior leadership level, you typically find a sort of an HR person at that role as well. But yeah, I think they do have a much more prominent role, which is good to see, because I think there is a greater recognition amongst organizations that people are an important factor, that you need to consider them. Mm-hmm. And then let's face it, many organizations don't make good decisions sometimes, and sometimes you need an HR individual to really provide that kind of sort of individualism and independence around, you know, good decision making and thinking it from a different perspective. But yes, it's good to see that evolve from a personnel all the way through to HR now.
Yeah, right.
I think that's quite an interesting point, actually, because as you say, it used to be called personnel, which to me says people based.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that HR is much more now also about the culture, the environment. So it's a wider scope. What would you say, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, hugely. When I started my day back with also a electronics company, we used to have lights on the back of our at the back outside the office, and when we wanted someone to come in, we'd press a button and it would be a green light, and when we didn't want someone to come in, it would be a red light, and that was it, right? And that's how we commanded, you know, whether people come and went in and out of our offices. But yeah, I mean, that was more around, you know, contracts, dismissing people, dealing with trade unions, which I had to do a lot of, and negotiating pay. So quite gritty issues, actually, which I still think are really, really core to an HR person's role.
Yeah.
And I still think it's, if anyone was developing their role in HR, I think those are really core issues to learn, because they're the skills you need to know about negotiation, about management, and dealing with all different types of people. But I think those skills are, but yes, it has evolved to a much more wider. And in fact, the profession has now become a lot more specialized. So sometimes you will find people who have a specialism in systems, or in pay, or in culture. So it has become a more diverse role. That's not to say I think there are some core things you need to learn there, but yeah.
And how do you think the leaders, how do the leaders using HR? So in the past, it used to be kind of quite a passive organization alongside in the background. And once a year, you might get something about pay rises or about benefits in kind, or you get stuff through, you know, from HR. But how is it HR there to support leaders now in the current environment? How should they be supporting leaders now?
Well, I think HR is, I think there's one of two ways that HR can either be invited, or you take a more sort of generally more proactive perspective and try to get an influence. And I mean, if you're fortunate enough to have HR already been invited into the leadership level, then you're kind of invited by the very nature of your role. However, a lot of HR individuals, and I was very much in this role, is that we're not invited, and we have to find a way to be invited and actually to be influenced and to be considered as relevant. So that has always been a challenge for HR people, is to really raise the flag to say, look, you know, what we do is relevant. You need to consider this type of work. And often I've found that actually what HR individuals bring is sometimes a different perspective. So leaders will often have one way of thinking, or they'll have one approach, or they're not entirely sure and they want to get a different opinion. And I think that's what HR are there to do, because they are there to almost be able to give a different perspective on something, a different consideration, a different direction. And more importantly, when it comes to key decisions, maybe around restructuring, is to think about guidance, about the direction, obviously to protect the organization, to make sure they're doing the right things in the right way. But sometimes they don't get it right, and sometimes you hear of organizations making, you know, pretty ghastly decisions, and they probably have done it necessarily not without consulting with their HR teams, but just going ahead and making the decision.
Well, you're a very specialist area, right? So if I'm a leader, I'm thinking a lot wider than that. I'm thinking about the business, I'm thinking about the environment, the marketplace, the future of the business, the strategy, and the HR. So you come in as that specialist. How much are you expected to know about my business? So I'm a leader. How much do you expect to know about that?
I think it's a good thing. We talked about HR trying to be relevant, right? And I think where you're relevant is you understand your organization, that person's organization. Yeah. Now, that doesn't to say that you know every product or every technology, but you need to understand, you know, what drives that business, what are the goals and what are the metrics, some of the financial data. And that's something that has been a challenge for HR business, HR individuals being considered as relevant, and that has been one of the things that has held us back and being at the top levels. Perhaps we don't necessarily understand the organisation, and if we want to be, as Neil was referring to, if we want to be influencing and providing leaders direction on what decisions to make around culture, around engagement, around retention, and having those conversations at the highest level, we need to be considered as both as HR with the soft skills, but we also need to be considered as business professionals as well.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I because it sounds like HR should be doing more to make themselves relevant and add value to leaders.
Yeah.
Turning it the other way around, what do you see good leaders do when they engage HR to support the process? Are there any good examples of leaders saying, let's almost lead with HR here, because we really need good people, develop people, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, often we think about leaders as a sort of a hierarchical role, when actually, leadership can occur at all levels in the organization. So I think that's it's not to think that a top CEO or CTO would just talk to their HR director, but I think HR should be visible and relevant to all levels within the organization. But for sure, I think it happens at all levels. So even from so for example, you take someone who's entry level into management, becoming a manager for the first time, managing people, they need to be given the structures around the processes in place that allow them to be able to build on that skill set. And maybe managers haven't managed people before. So HR has a role in terms of providing the guidance, the processes around how to do things. They need to make sure the learning and development's in place. So I think HR plays a role at all levels of leaders in terms of their development, from the very entry level all the way up to the top level, and that's making sure that the mechanisms are in place and the supporting structures. We often talk about HR as being a business partner. That was a concept that was developed about 10-15 years ago.
Yeah.
And it became it has continued to be quite a key role. And the concept of business partner, when you put business partner next to HR, it means that you are working alongside the business, being invited to sales meetings, or board meetings, to team meetings, and you're considered to be the HR representative there. And I think that's really, once you've been invited and part of that, then you can really start to influence and hear what the business is doing. So I think that's always something where I've always encouraged HR to be part of, and obviously then they can start to influence and provide direction on.
Or actually, the leader should take ownership of making sure HR are there in the room.
Yeah.
Because what you just described, I'm just thinking of my experience with various companies I've worked with, because you've got the finance guy focused on finance and how we're doing with the P&L. You've got the sales guy focused on how we're doing with sales. You've got the delivery team on, are we delivering? Are we retaining customers?
Yeah.
And actually, whenever HR's in the room, in whatever business I've sat in, it's changed the conversation, or it's brought a different dynamic. It's almost, and everybody in the room values it. Everybody in the room go, oh yeah, actually, that's a good thought. Or, oh yeah, we should think about how that affects the people, or we should think about how we upskill them or develop them. So I can see how just a leader bringing them into the room is changing the conversation slightly, and probably adding more value to the outcome of their business.
Yeah.
I think the bit you mentioned there, Chris, about the fact that you're a partner, means that you are involved in all the conversations most of the time, not brought in, not helicoptered in for an issue and then sent away again, right?
Yeah.
Because some of those things, you might sit in a meeting for 2 hours and only 30 minutes of it is relevant to you, but it's good background and understanding. It's like when you mentioned about training of new managers. I would say you guys need to be involved at the point of deciding on appointment of a manager.
Yeah, certainly. So I think HR business partnering, it was a concept that was introduced, and has been very, very successful. It's always been a challenge in terms of getting actually leaders recognizing that HR has a role. I think in some organisations they still think, well, HR is only there for hiring and firing. And actually, if you talk to a lot of employees, you know, they kind of like say, oh, you need to go and talk to HR. It puts a fear of God in them, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's slightly unfortunate, because it doesn't have to be that case. And that's probably HR needs to also think about their brand and how they are seen by people within the organisation. Again, it comes back to the question of value, right? And visibility and being seen as a person, because actually HR can be quite a lonely job sometimes. You know, it's your leaders are one thing, but at the same time you have to be slightly independent. You know, on the one hand you can be a leader's best mate, but at the same time you also have to be slightly independent and in the middle. So it can be quite an individual role, actually.
Yeah, can I just drill into that a little bit? What's your general perception on who people think HR is serving? Do the employees think you're there to serve them, to the company, or do they think HR is part of the company working on them? Does that make sense? The question.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Albert, actually. And it's I have a point of view, but I don't think everyone will always agree. HR, I suppose I've been working very much in commercial organizations, and HR is there to serve the business. There's no doubt about it in my perspective. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't break the law, right? Or you should comply with you know, employment law regulations, and that means sometimes making some quite, you know, clear direction to the business, to leaders, that is not what you can do. Or and there's sometimes grapples with HR people, because sometimes they are maybe the business is doing something that they don't really feel in favor of, but they have to go along with. And I remember I sometimes have taught younger people coming straight from university to do their what they call CIPD course, and so they're starting into HR, and I think for some of them it's a bit of a shock. You know, they're working for quite tough organizations and working with trade unions and such, and they're finding it quite hard dealing with the decisions that are being made by leaders that go against their standing, their point of view, and that's quite a thing to grapple with. But sometimes I feel you learn from these things as you become a little bit more experienced. You bring that experience with you into some of the decisions and conversations you have with leaders.
It's interesting. No, I appreciate that. It's interesting, actually, because to be honest, I'm guilty. When I was leading in a large corporate, I'm guilty of seeing HR as a block to what I wanted to do, rather than as an enabler. And since since I've been working with lots of different companies, I've actually seen lots of different ways. I've seen HR as an enabler and alongside the leader, so they're really embraced in the. And I've also seen them almost as the agony aunt in companies, where whenever something. So it's a bit bizarre for Albert and I, because we come from corporate life, where if you've got a grievance or you've got any kind of conversation about your development or your performance, you go to your manager. But in lots and lots of companies, that's not the case. The manager's there to run the business, not to deal with people. So they go to HR for those kind of conversations, which I find a little strange. So there is a real difference between that agony aunt person that people go and whinge to, and the person who's alongside the business leader helping shape the conversation.
I think HR can sometimes encourage that situation, right? If you're seen to be the sponge and be very receptive to these issues, and my door is always open, then you can be seen to be doing that. And actually some leaders like that. It takes the I've seen leaders say, right, I don't want to get involved in any of those issues. Just go and talk to HR about it, and then they can be the person who's receptive to it. But of course that counters really what we have wanted to see, is where managers take on more of an HR responsibility, and that's an evolving piece, and that is becoming very relevant in these days, where we see a very conscious effort by businesses to ensure their managers are looking at employees from a perspective around talent, around how we can engage with our employees more on a more individual level, understand what the motivating factors are. All these considerations now are something that has evolved over the years, and it's really where the manager is taking on more HR duties, really, or more HR responsibilities. And actually, a lot of managers don't like doing that. They would kind of focus on their bit of work, their selling, or their expertise, rather than necessarily doing the people aspect.
Well, I think that's a good message for our audience here, right? Leaders cannot abdicate from HR topics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You might have a business partner, you might have an HR director, HR manager, call them what you want, but you are ultimately accountable as the leader for the workforce, just as you are for the business results. So that's a really important message for our leaders here, right? You are responsible for that.
Yeah.
And that's best practice, I guess. That best practice is you don't have a things to do list, and the thing that keeps dropping off the bottom is the HR piece, because people are your business, you know. In most cases, people is the business, or business doesn't survive without people. I just wanted to kind of come to a slightly different topic, but same sort of thing, is what do you see? Because, well, let me ask a question rather than make an assumption. How much time do HR professionals spend on dealing with the problems in the organization, and how much time do they spend on dealing with the top talent in the organization?
Okay, yeah. Well, I think, I would say the majority of HR professionals spend most of their time dealing with the problems and issues.
Okay.
Probably the old 80-20 rule, I suspect, applies. But yeah, they are probably spending a lot of their time, high percentage of the time, dealing with issues. And of course, they get called in to do that, right? And they invest a lot of time. And often, these issues and problems are left too late. So the issue has become not just a small issue; it's become a massive issue, and you have to unbundle it all and try to understand what the core of the problem is.
So what do you see as best practice in that then? Because that was one of the questions I really wanted to uncover and help our audience with, really, is, you know, as a good leader, or best practice, what do good leaders do to try and make that? Because we can't avoid the fact that employees do things wrong, that they are poor performers and stuff like that. That's just a fact of life.
Yeah.
But how can a good leader make sure that becomes a painless or less pain process than where you just leave it and ignore it?
Well, I think early intervention is always necessary, and that might be that, you know, if you've got a kind of an ongoing performance issue that's starting to kind of become an ongoing area, is to kind of first of all, obviously, use all the skills and all the processes and all the tools you've got that the organization provides you. But, you know, I do think it's worth someone, you know, reaching out, talking to your HR business partner or the relevant contact earlier. And it might be just checking in to say, look, this is what I am planning to do, or this is what I'm doing. Do you feel this is right? So addressing it early, and obviously the manager taking responsibility for that. So often when we're dealing with challenges and issues, it goes from the leader, the manager, to HR, when actually it is the manager's responsibility to address and deal with the issue, and HR is providing them the guidance and direction and helping them make the right steps. Not necessarily HR having to try to solve the problems. That's often been the case, as HR ends up having to sweep it up afterwards.
I think at that end of the scale, review and coach has got to be better than reprimand, right?
Oh, every time.
And that is
using,
Carry on, Chris. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, Albert. Yeah, using your HR contact as a coach to be able to talk through things and stuff like that. And, you know, and I think that really applies certainly for junior managers, perhaps starting out for the first time, or who perhaps lesser experienced, is to kind of use HR as a coach to help them. And I think senior managers also can provide that early. But coming back to your point, Neil, I think all the time is to be early intervention. Come to your HR business partner, or come to the HR person earlier on in the process itself. So that
you get the right advice on how to record it, deal with it, handle it, document it, all that kind of stuff. Because I've been involved in this personally, but, you know, when you try and look backwards and document things that happened 9 months ago, it's very difficult. Whereas actually, if you recognized and started, it didn't ignore the problem 9 months ago, and started making the records that you needed to make, or keeping the emails, or whatever you needed to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Then
I'm a big favour of having some basics in place, which are things like, you know, regular one-to-ones between HR and the manager, you know, be it once every 2 weeks, and just using those meetings to understand from an HR for both sides, understand what's going on within the senior manager's team. Obviously attending those meetings, understanding what those issues are, and as you say, Neil, you know, good documentation. Well, depending on what the challenge might be, it's maybe goal setting and making sure things are done. You know, most organizations put the process and steps in place. It's whether or not the business leaders and the managers really follow it, right, and have the discipline to follow these things.
I see it so often that it's a once-a-year thing, and everybody's scrambling to get the objectives and the achievement done in the last 4 weeks of the year, because they've got to get it all done and signed off. And the only time that those objectives have been looked at is in that last month of the year.
But just another point on this, a good learning point actually, guys, for our audience, right, which is documenting items to do with HR and people is really important, that both parties have got the same understanding. That's a really key thing, right? Because you may go away from a conversation as a leader thinking you've left a message with somebody, and their understanding might be different than yours. So documenting it is really key, because when you come back round to review and coach, you can actually see that you're both looking at the same hymn sheet. I think that's really important when you're talking about people-based issues. Right?
And also, I mean, you talked about sort of top talent as well, you know, how much time you're spending.
I was just going to come on to that, funny enough. I was going to ask you, what should leaders be doing with their top end of their resources to make sure that they stay, that they develop, etc.?
Well, I think just first of all, knowing who your top talent is. You'd be surprised how many organizations don't know who their top talent is. So, you know, having the you know, the systems in place to know and being able to recognize who that top talent is. Whatever, a lot of companies have, you know, pools of talent, and they recognize that top 20%. But so just knowing who that talent is. And then secondly is, you know, are you doing anything about it? I mean, I've been surprised so many times that people who are in a top talent have put their resignation in, and then the boss says to them, "Hey, do you know you're in the top 10%?" And they go, "No, I never knew that. I never knew I was considered as a top 10% employee. Why didn't you tell me that? I might have reconsidered my decision." So, you know, organizations do spend a lot of effort, but it's the follow-up. It's the processes, the steps that has to go in afterwards. You know, be it things like interventions you might put in place, the mentoring, the coaching, the leadership programs, whatever's relevant for that top talent. Making sure that you follow up. So those, I think, obviously knowing who your top talent is key, but also making sure that actually they know they are part of that wider network. I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, really.
I think the things you talked about there, Chris, in terms of making sure people know they're part of a community, which is it's an elite community. Why not? Why would you not be open about that you've made it to that, so other people can aspire to that, is one thing. Also, the other things you do on coaching and development, they're part of the reward and recognition to that top talent, right? That's a gift. Because I think this area for me it's a proactive area for a leader. Nothing will trigger you to do this unless you choose to do it, right? When the problem areas of HR, they raise themselves and they come onto your agenda. You don't have a choice sometimes. For this, you need to make it part of your agenda, right? It's your decision to be proactive there. I think that's really key.
Interestingly, if you break your talent into 3 pools, you know, your sort of lower talent and mid talent and high talent, the research generally shows that the higher levels of talent tend to be quite, by the very nature they tend to be high talent, tend to be quite independent, and therefore they kind of clearly have aspirations and ambition and everything goes with it, and tend to be quite good self-learners. So they are the ones that are quite self-driven. But the organization clearly needs to recognize them. the talent that often managers, or we talk about leaders generally, don't tend to not spend as much time and need to spend more time is that middle section, because the middle group is where your majority of population are. If you most organizations would have a traditional bell-shaped curve of where their employee distribution is, and the majority of sort of mid performers or your mid talent are in that middle section. And of course that is your potential, because that's your engine. But also it's where your potential, and that is that if you think about, that's where your 50% is or more. That's a talent which you have potential to drive to your top level. So it's actually where a lot of your effort should be spending, is in that middle level, to try and get them into a top level, or certainly to retain them in there so they don't slip back, but to get them into a high level. And so the evidence shows that, really, as if I'm a leader, where my investment is clearly at the top level, they can actually drive the results. But generally, as a whole, they clearly need some attention, but probably more of my effort should be at that middle section, really.
It's a really good point, actually, because just thinking on that, Chris, which I hadn't done before, is that middle area, you could call them the steady eddies, right? But they are the engine of your business.
Yeah.
So I guess it's also an important point. If somebody doesn't aspire to be in the top 10%, 20%, that doesn't make them a bad employee. That makes them a really solid employee.
Yeah.
So looking after those people and not forcing them to want to, because by the very nature, sometimes top talent is looking to move on to new jobs.
All the time. And sometimes it's the best place for them, right? It's sometimes the best place for them.
Exactly. So you don't want a complete churning business all the time. And if some people are happy staying in the middle, doing a very good job every day, that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's important, I think we say to people, don't feel you have to be pushing to be top talent, or you have to be watching out to getting pulled up because you haven't done something. Just doing a great job for the company, for some people, is their career, and they're happy doing that. And that's great.
It's a really it is a really important point, actually, and a good learning point again for the audience here about, in that bell curve. It's easy to spend your time on the problems because you have to, and to invest time on the top talent because they're the ones that are driving the business, as you said. But actually, the ones in the middle also are ones that can go and find other jobs as well. And when they go, it leaves a bit of a hole that you have to fill. So really good point. And so I've got one more question I was going to ask, but Albert, have you got another question you want to ask before we wrap up?
The only question I would ask, while we got Chris's experience here, is if somebody is interested in getting into a career in HR, do you have any advice for them?
Oh gosh, yeah, I think you know what, you can get into HR from any direction, right? In fact, some of the best HR people have got other experiences, be it business experiences, sales, customer services. And in fact, a lot of our very high HR leaders in organizations in the UK, for instance, have not necessarily started their career in HR. So I would say, gain some experience in the business, and then if you have a chance, spend some time with HR. Find role is specializing, so you can start to specialize in technology, people systems, and things like that. So just try to spend some time with HR, and then of course there are qualifications you can do, which kind of helps. But I think you don't necessarily have a career set on HR from the start.
So you mentioned CIPD earlier, Chris. That's Chartered Institute of Professional Development. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. That's kind of like the kite mark for HR, which still recognizes as a sort of a leading certification. And I think most HR professionals need something like that. And of course, as you go through your career, you can sharpen up by doing extra qualification certifications, but it's not necessary. It's mostly down to experience. Working in different organizations. Every HR in different organizations will be slightly different. So, having a chance to work in different types of organizations. I was very lucky to work, in a multiple, from trade unions to, and I think, having a chance to work in these different types of, be it blue collar, white collar organizations, is very helpful as part of your career as well.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
So I think we'll wrap up there. Actually, I think that's we've covered a load of stuff. The key messages I took away, I think, were, make sure the HR person is part of the leadership team. Make sure you're involving and communicating early. That you use HR the same as you would use your accountant, the same as you would use anybody else professionally in your organization, that they are there to help you be successful as a leader and help the business be successful. And without them, the business is less efficient and less functionally effective. So no, I just really, Chris, thank you for joining today and sharing your thoughts. Thank you also for all the support you're giving the clients that you work with for me, because I know they really value your input and support, because it's not easy to find good HR professionals. Albert, any closing words you want to?
No, just thank you, Chris. Thanks for coming and joining us. Really good to spend the time with you. The only other thing I'd say is that to our audience, guys, please subscribe. We are now live on Leadership Detectives as our branding, and we'll point a lot of things in that direction rather than personally to Neil and myself. So please do subscribe to that. Enjoy the material that we've got here. Don't forget we're on podcast as well as on YouTube. And look forward to bringing you some more material as we go forward.
And give us the thumbs up whenever you get a chance. And Chris, thank you again. Have a great day, and we'll look forward to catching up soon. Cheers, guys.
Take care. Good day.